Did Dragon Ball Super ruin Gohan? Gohan has always had discourse surrounding his character, but especially in Super, people say that he's been greatly mishandled. Years ago, he was considered wasted, and now it's a little bit more nuanced. But why is that? And is any of that true? Was he truly ruined? We'll be using both the anime and the manga continuities for this video. By the time of recording, it's May 24th. You guys know I'm way ahead of schedule, so knowing my luck, something will come out that makes this video outdated. And if so, there will be a follow-up. We'll go through a brief synopsis of what happened with him and why people have issues with him. Let's start with Resurrection F, particularly the anime version for Super, although this does apply to the Dragon Ball Z movie as well. The first sign of distaste with Gohan was here. Once more, it looked like he got weaker. He could only access Super Saiyan, no longer using Ultimate. I know technically this was part of Z, but this is still very much a part of modern Dragon Ball, and there's no point in debating semantics here. This is pretty much the case in both the movie and the anime. Although in the anime he had a particularly worse showing. It seemed like it was rock bottom for him here. In both the anime and manga following this, it became clear that he started training. Weirdly enough, he's not part of the Tournament of Destroyers, because he was busy, but not because he wasn't training. In the anime, we even see this outright. He explains that he's just busy that day, although he was training amidst being recruited. And later on in the manga, he even mentions the fact that he was gravity training. He hasn't been taking it incredibly seriously, but he still was doing something and keeping up so he doesn't get completely rusty. Now we could skip forward to the Tournament of Power. This is where a big chunk of its development comes in, because Gohan wasn't really doing too much before here anyways. And things also diverge between the two versions. For this section, we will be focusing more on the anime part, just because there's a bigger focus on him here, and honestly, the anime Tournament of Power had more room to breathe than the manga Tournament of Power, so partially due to that as well. In the Tournament of Destroyers, it's pretty clear that he's a smart fighter still. Of course, he's not on Goku's level at the moment, but he's still fighting effectively with Super Saiyan, and while even heavily poisoned and blinded, he still figures out ways to fight. It's clear that he's a very good tactician here, and amidst the whole recruitment arc we see more of this, but especially during more of his own training with Piccolo. While he still doesn't have access to Ultimate, it's clear that he has gotten stronger and better as a fighter. In the anime's version, we see him get Super Saiyan 2 again, and eventually he gets Ultimate back. In the manga, it's a little bit more subtle. He's clearly shown and stated to be stronger, but instead of going through the Super Saiyan forms and unlocking Ultimate again, he's just seemingly an Ultimate the entire time, even though he's not really drawn as such. We'll also get more into Ultimate later because it's been handled weirdly in Super. Although it does bring up an interesting point, strangely enough, I've seen Gohan criticized here for being handed his power, particularly when he fought Goku before the tournament, because he was contending with the Super Saiyan Blue Goku. I don't really think this is a fair criticism for him, especially because we have seen what it's like for him to be handed power before. That happened in Z, twice actually. Not that I have a problem with what happened on Namek or the Ultimate Ritual. I'm just saying, if you want to look at a point where he actually was handed power, those are two examples. Here, he trains for it. Personally, I don't know how I feel about the fact that he just stopped training completely before Resurrection F, because after the Buu Saga, I hoped he would have learned his lesson, but I'm glad he at least had to work to regain his power here. In the Buu Saga, he kind of got some sort of shortcut to get it, and maybe by this point in the story he was used to taking shortcuts, but after Resurrection F, those don't work anymore. He didn't have that at his disposal. But here it's at least kind of excusable that he stopped training. He just had a family after all, and we've always known that Gohan was going to become a scholar eventually. It makes sense that he lost focus on training and got a little weaker here. That's why I don't really have a huge issue with how he was handled in Resurrection F. Well, at least in the movie version, the anime made him look a little pathetic, honestly. But again, he has an excuse here. It's not like he stopped training out of laziness. He stopped training because he had a change in lifestyle. He's an adult with a baby daughter, and he's a scholar like he always wanted to be. Being a scholar was his dream after all, and with how new it is to him, it makes sense that he hasn't really found the perfect balance between everything yet. The only way he'd get back to his peak is by actually working for it. And when he meets with Trunks again, there's a really nice contrast between them. Trunks is clearly very happy that Gohan achieved his dream of becoming a scholar. And even though he might be a bit complacent in his peaceful life, with Trunks even a little bit weirded out by how much he's changed, he realizes that this is the exact thing he's been fighting for. And he's glad Gohan gets to have that here. And even with the problems that I have with the end of this arc, I think Gohan's send-off with Trunks is handled really well. It shows clear aspirations for both characters. Gohan inspires hope for Trunks once again, just like future Gohan did for him. And it seems seeing Trunks again has changed Gohan to an extent as well. He was so busy he almost didn't make it in time to say goodbye to Trunks, but he shows up here for the send-off, being the last person to actually say goodbye to him. It's a really beautifully handled scene, even if the circumstances surrounding it aren't too great. We've always been told Gohan has great potential, and even during Super we'd hear that said, particularly Vegeta saying that too. But the way it's portrayed here is really nice. He actually had to put it to use, and over time, he did surpass his former self in the process. Maybe the criticism of him being handed power is more so due to the fact that he got very strong, but personally I don't blame Gohan for that. That's just a broader issue with power creep in general, particularly with modern Dragon Ball as a whole. Also, this is one of the least egregious cases of that in my opinion. It is a bit of a crazy jump, but definitely not the craziest we've seen. Look at Frieza, look at 17, and honestly, even look at Goku and Vegeta, and how much stronger they got after the Goku Black arc. I have kind of an old video about that I'll link above. So that point about his power is a little contentious. Personally, I don't have a problem with it. I think his jump in power is one of the more reasonable ones, especially because we've known this about Gohan since he was first introduced. This is a really good way to utilize his potential, seeing him actually train and showing what it's like to train with that type of potential, and not just training a few months off screen and going from Namek level to Super Saiyan Blue level. Anyways, the Tournament of Power also has some nice characterization for Gohan. Him being the leader for the team shows his growth as a person and as a warrior, particularly with how Piccolo's influenced him. Granted, half the team doesn't listen to him when he tries to enact a strategy, but we see him planning things out and being a smart warrior. Plus, another big aspect to him that's improved here is the fact that he's not overconfident anymore. Piccolo has really helped work on that, because it's an issue that's always plagued him. But now we've moved past that. His fight with Goku before the tournament is also a perfect example of his growth as a person and as a warrior. It displays his dedication as well, and it's a nice father-son moment. Goku once again gets to acknowledge Gohan's great power after having not seen it for so long. Another big thread for Gohan's character in Super is the fact that he's a big family man now, as I mentioned before. It's a really nice and admirable aspect of his character. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to drop a like. It really does help the channel and shows me you want to see more videos like this one. We even see a bit of this during the tournament. There's a point when he eliminates someone from another universe, and you can see him conflicted as he does so, because this fighter Abani is just like him. He's the last warrior of Universe 10, and he makes it clear that he'll do anything to defend it. Before getting eliminated, one of the last things he does is ask Gohan his name, and he's very respectful during the fight too. But to make things even worse, when Gohan eliminates him, Gohan sees a picture of Abani and his family, with a wife and a kid just like him. He and Gohan are very similar. Even universes apart, they share something in common, and you could see visible guilt on Gohan's face after eliminating Abani. Personally, I think the tournament didn't really do an amazing job portraying this overall. People are deciding the fates of entire universes here, and it's addressed here and there, but it feels a bit lacking in a sense. But small scenes like this are perfect examples of how it should have been handled, because not only does it add to Gohan's character, but the entire themes of the arc overall. It's great on a small scale and a large scale, and very emblematic of Gohan's character. Episode 118 of Super is also one of my favorite in all of Super. You know an episode's really good when you remember the episode number. This episode is great for multiple reasons, but one of those is because of how Gohan steps up here. He and Piccolo are fighting against the Universe 6 Namekians, Saunel and Pirina. He really feels like a leader here. Dragon Ball Super is full of references to previous things, and some of them do feel kind of gratuitous. But in this episode there is one reference that feels really well done. It has an actual reason for being there rather than just nostalgia. We see Gohan save Piccolo in the exact same way Piccolo saved Gohan in the Saiyan saga. Gohan's no longer that weak, defenseless child, scared and unable to fight. He's confident and powerful. He can hold his own as a warrior. And what better way to display this than him defending his teacher, his friend? It's a small scene, and on the surface it might just look like a reference. But it's more than a reference. It's an acknowledgement of his growth as a person. Gohan knows exactly what type of power he's fighting with, and he knows how to utilize it. Plus, he knows what he's actually fighting for. Even in Gohan's fight with Dispo, you see him take on a much more serious leadership role. Besides having a good strategy in general, he makes a tough call and sacrifices himself to stop Dispo. Plus, he takes a no-nonsense role with Frieza as well. All around, the tournament has really good writing for him. It makes him feel like a proper leader. It shows how much he's changed. And the strength that he's worked hard to get back, it feels earned now. He's using it in a proper way. And it's also not excessive either. He clearly still has some sort of struggles. He's not an infallible warrior that was just granted a bunch of new power. He had to work on it, and he still does have a ways to go. And he has some really amazing character moments with Goku and Piccolo as well. And we know he's going to go further from this. He even tells Goku he's aiming to go even beyond Ultimate. Which, even though it's very vague, this can be considered some sort of foreshadowing to Beast later on, which we will get to. In the manga version, there is less focus on him, but he still does have a really good fight with Kefla, although a lot of it is off-screen, unfortunately. And he also kind of tells Kefla the same thing he told Goku in the anime, but a little different this time. He wants to focus on growing more as a human rather than a Saiyan. He's developing more into his own person. Instead of just trying to emulate Goku or Piccolo, Gohan at this point in the story is on a completely different path. He's now his own person and own warrior. In the Moro arc, Gohan doesn't really play a major role, but he still has a decently sized role. We still see the same sort of characterization continue here. He's kept up with his training as he promised, and the moment a threat shows up, he appears to help because he knows he's the best shot at victory. He shows up in work clothes too, which is honestly a great choice. It shows how quick he is to drop everything and fight if he needs to. And it further displays that balance that he's gained now, which he didn't have before. Also, honestly, it looks pretty cool. I wish he kept this on for the 7-3 fight, even if it's not logical to fight in these clothes. Thematically, it fits really well, even if logically it doesn't really make too much sense. And later on when Moro attacks Earth, once more we see this dedication. He's part of the crew defending Earth, and when Moro fights Goku later on, he immediately tries to step up when Goku's down, even though he clearly knows it's a losing battle. On to his next appearance in Superhero, things get a little bit more muddy here, at least from my point of view. Obviously this movie has a huge focus on Gohan. This was originally intended to be a movie all about Piccolo, and then Gohan was added in later. And for the most part, Piccolo still does fill that main character role, but a lot of the movie revolves around Gohan too, and particularly Piccolo getting Gohan to train again, which feels a little weird, especially the way it's shown. So Gohan did train before Superhero. Gohan mentions this later on, and to an extent he has lost sight of it. He was just way too locked in with work, but it is very clear that Piccolo misjudged him to an extent, and Gohan has been training in secret. And it doesn't seem like he's fully lost his powers. He just let his guard down against Piccolo, got too busy with work, and Piccolo kind of misread the situation to an extent. So it's both a case of Gohan kind of losing sight of what he needs to do, and Piccolo overestimating how rusty Gohan is. But it still feels like kind of a slight step backwards for him, especially because at one point, Goku even says he thinks Gohan and Vegeta could just solve his problems. If there's a threat on Earth, he'll just rely on them. This line might seem kind of small, but it's really disappointing to hear, honestly. Gohan's development up to this point has been really enjoyable, and he's learned that he has to use his great power to protect those that he loves. He's not a battle junkie like Goku or Vegeta, but he can still find enjoyment and fulfillment from some aspect of it and make use of his gift. But when he says this, it feels like a backpedal. And it might sound like I'm overanalyzing this line, like, okay, maybe it wasn't intended that way. But in the manga later on, in chapter 102, Gohan mentions this to Goku again. So it's not like it's a tongue-in-cheek line, it's a lesson that Gohan actually feels he learned. Which is just weird because this is something he's learned a while ago. And especially in the manga's case, when we had the Moro arc 2 arcs before this, Gohan's acting exactly like the things he's saying to Goku here. He says Goku told him he always needed to be ready at a moment's notice to fight, and he's only just now getting the message. But he did that in the Moro arc. Was that just a coincidence that he did that? Did he not realize this that long ago? Especially after all the other stuff I just mentioned about him in Super. Also, now onto Ultimate and Beast. This is the point in the story when Super fully commits to making Ultimate a full-on transformation. Previously, it was kind of wishy-washy with it. From Z, it sort of felt like it was a state of being. Gohan stayed in it at all times and was never quote-unquote de-transformed. Sure, he could power up and down, but he was always using Ultimate when powered up. He just instantly went into it. In the manga, it's weird because Gohan was always just fighting looking like this. And we could just assume it's his Ultimate state drawn differently, but it's made confusing with the fact that in his anime, this is what his base state looks like. In the anime, Ultimate is treated like a regular transformation, at least for the most part, but by Superhero, it's undoubtedly a transformation. And again, it's kind of weird in the manga, especially with how Ultimate was handled before, because Gohan would never transform before. Because it seems that in the manga, Gohan was just always in some sort of Ultimate state, even though it didn't really look like it. At least in the anime, it's somewhat consistent with how it's treated. But the fact that the manga follows the same superhero events down to a T, that just makes it really weird and needlessly convoluted. As for Beast, I don't have a problem with that at all. I don't mind Gohan having a brand new form, especially one that's unique to him and something that ties into how he's always been built up. I'm hoping it gets more of an explanation soon, because it did get some in the last few chapters, but it could use a little bit more beyond that. So is this an example of him being handed power? Well, that's also something that's pretty subjective. To me personally, I feel it makes sense. Even though the foreshadowing for it was kind of weak, we have been told before that Gohan was going to get some sort of new power. We've been shown that Gohan's been training to an extent, and we've always been told, even in Super, that Gohan has great potential. Vegeta even mentioned before that Gohan has greater potential than him or Goku, reiterating the same things we knew from Z. Is the power boost kind of absurd? Yeah, I agree in that regard. Especially after his fight with Ultra Instinct Goku. I could see why someone might think it's a little excessive, even though I personally have no problem with Beast. So overall, did Super ruin Gohan in any way? No, I think his character was handled perfectly fine. Sure, there were some missteps along the way, and honestly some things that were retreaded that shouldn't have been retreaded. But I don't think he flat out regressed or was completely destroyed. And in terms of the original run of Dragon Ball Super's anime, I think he was one of the best handled characters in the main cast. But let me know what you think below. Do you think he was mishandled in any way, and why? What do you think about his power and transformations as well? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. It is a discussion video after all, so let's start discussing. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.